And today I want to talk about the reset. What I may know about the reset. I've often talked about how one may not even want to survive a reset from what we see left over all throughout our realm. But nevertheless, I think knowledge is more important. We should have knowledge, and once we have truth, we can then decide what we want to do. Giving us the most clear understanding of the cause of this event in which we see evidence everywhere. Sporadic plasma discharges cooking our realm without a clear reason. We've speculated on whether this is a natural, cyclical event, or man-made, or both. And here we see this Vijara, a symbol depicted in many different cultures, this one specifically seeming to come from India. And what are these symbols? Just pointless ornamentation, or something with a bigger meaning? And this channel proposes that this is a symbol of our realm and ultimately the reset. And here I'll show you what it resembles. This plasma discharge event, an arc or a bell of energy. And imagine this turned on its side and we existing somewhere in the center. The top and bottom being pure energy, and every so often reversing its poles and flipping the directions of discharge. And we exist somewhere in the center. And I believe we're always told half-truths in the mainstream. We were told about magnetic pole reversals and their damaging effect every so often. The part that was untrue was the model we were given, and the time scale, as always. Here we can get an idea of the time scale, and essentially the sun and moon creating a spiral, up and down, opposing each other, and typically finishing a spiraling cycle around the Christmas season. Predictably, the low point, or the high, depending on your perspective, but the ending of the cycle. And if these poles or magnetic fields should shift, it will happen at this time. And this being the reason for all the clocks, sundial, timekeepers found all through our realm, the civilizations of the past understanding this well, depicting it in all their art, and keeping track of the shortening of the days. In a normal circumstance, the sun will reach a low point for 3 days around this merry time and season, and typically return, start moving back up again. And I believe this is the metaphorical idea of the religious death of the sun and its resurrection after 3 days. However, in a reset cycle, the sun will not continue its upward journey. It will actually disappear and continue moving away. And at this point, we have 7 days of darkness, cataclysms, and finally a reset. This system flips on its head, and we now move into a golden age. And in the golden age, there are no seasons, and it's always warm, and the sky is red. We move from a blue sky to a red sky. And I believe this is what the Native Americans, especially the Hopi, speak of, the blue and red star, and the different cycles. This cycle that we're in now, having very harsh seasons. Again, a half-truth, we would be in an ice age right now. When we look at a lot of this architecture and the ridiculous stories of building these works of wonder, often there is no mention of the winter and how in a cold area, 6 months are pretty much worthless outdoors. Personally, all my projects stop in the winter, and all activities seem to move indoors, with the exception of cutting wood and fighting to keep warm. And here, the predicting of these cycles is not cut and dry. It seems like the longer there is between cycles, the more intense the reset, seeming to build a great pressure and eventually flipping to balance itself out. And we do see that. We see past resets that have completely melted this realm, and then we see very recent signs of reset in which everything is mostly preserved, however the people are gone. And once again, once this reset would pass, being very favorable conditions, just a nice, warm, red glow of constant, again a golden age. But this reset ultimately being a plasma system, being very violent, and I talked about this in a past video for a second, and how this channel was talking about the need to tie oneself off with rope to a rock, being anchored, because for a moment, this reset having a sucking effect, and being in a nice cave may protect against some risk of getting sucked up, but that also creates other possibilities and risks, such as getting sealed off from rubble in a cave. He suggests tying oneself off to rock, but not using any metal, not having any metal on your person, or plastic, for these will not fare well in a plasma environment. And it's very simple with those prerequisites. And also, of course, being on rock, as the Terra will become liquid and liquefy, taking on new shapes and patterns emitted by the frequency, being a byproduct of this event. Also, I think the Bible speaks of the byproduct of this event being trumpets, and how we'll hear the trumpets. This probably being the sound of the pressure being released. The Bible always being so flowery and metaphorical, but giving us everything. Perhaps this is the only way something can survive, is in metaphor or even games, songs, and art. And here we know this is a significant time. This time, and of course, the controllers have completely perverted this time. Most people are running around preoccupied with the false meanings of this holiday season, submerged in consumerism, and yet, as always, a half-truth. One should be preparing, casually, the way the squirrel gathers, in putting our things in order every year, perhaps 2 weeks before, remaining calm and tranquil and observant in this sacred time of year. And when the sun returns back on its course, we celebrate. But we certainly don't get lost in the ideas of man and lose sight of the real meaning of this time of year.
And I'm amazed with the half-truths we're told. Death Valley really is Death Valley, but for different reasons. Aside from the heat, when driving through Death Valley, we see things like the Valley of Fire. And really, when looking at these mountains carefully, this is a fresh and recent event. Almost nothing grows on these mountains because it's mostly rock, and the idea that rock would take millions upon millions of years to push up just shows that everything in this reality is backwards. Really, I think what we're seeing is large structures that have come down and not been pushed up. And we see so many proofs. It's one thing on a small scale to understand that structures could have been cooked, but very difficult to wrap one's head around that notion when looking at things of this magnitude. How big were these buildings? How big were the people? And again, we see how cooked the dirt actually is. Any organic life or microbial matter that would promote growth is gone, heated to such a high temperature that growth is just not permitted in this soil. The little growth we do see is in areas such as this right off of the road, where there's a little channel or runoff, and most of this vegetation holds a lot of its own water on the surface, similar to a cactus. And if all these mountains were buildings, what a scary world, actually, to a people our size, reminding me of the Bible when men were compared to grasshoppers in the presence of the giants roaming around. And when looking at all these mountains, imagining that they're buildings, even if they were trees, absolutely scary. What a massive realm this must have been. If they were buildings or trees, massive shadows, and if this whole realm wasn't so cooked out, and it really is cooked out, scarring on every continent, just wastelands that make no sense, oftentimes in what would seemingly be very fertile locations are deserts or sand dunes on mountain tops. Even here, as I look over, sand running down that mountain, a channel of sand, as if it flowed in a matter of a few hours and re-solidified. And here we go. Here's some sand dunes right now. We'll just pull over and we'll let Chief run around in the sand. Do you see these sand dunes? All over the place. And we're up here in the mountains of California. And this is no national park, nothing interesting. It looks like people have just littered just a bunch of trash out here. And all sand. Let's get away from the trash and we'll go look at these sand dunes. And here we are, just as I was speaking of dunes. We're at about 3,000 feet elevation. And again, situated in an area that should have a nice climate, that does have a nice climate. And here we just have a beach. Now, if it was some tidal flow, it would just be level. We wouldn't see these parts poking up like this. And I once saw a movie series, I don't remember which part, but it was The Mummy. And The Mummy, I think it was the first one, somewhere at the end, just showed all these cities turning into sand. Poof! It was a beautiful depiction, giving us an idea of how either some frequency, or I'm not sure, in this silly movie, I think it may have been some magic. And really, whatever it was, is almost magic-like to us. We have no idea what could nuke this realm in such a fashion. And somewhat sporadically, hit and miss, some areas, like this one, not faring as well as others. And some perfectly untouched. And I say I don't know, but really an electrical discharge would give us this random and sporadic wipeout that we experience. And this is really beautiful. And all the beautiful things, sights that we enjoy, really are just ruins. Here looking like I see gold flakes. And is there any evidence buried under here? I don't think so. A lot of these sites becoming claims for mining. This would be a perfect site to snatch up and inherit and sell truckloads of fine sand. And sand is one of the more expensive minerals. As far as having some rock delivered, usually the larger the rock, the cheaper. And I guess we'll move on. And I know I've said it before, but it's so similar to what the Native Americans tell us. The dirt, the soil, the sand, these are our ancestors. And these are past civilizations. And it's amazing when you just come to understand something and see it all around you, and yet don't quite have everything you need to prove it to the rest of your fellow man. We're still in that stage in which we seem crazy, and still in that stage where it's very exciting. And all around these piles of sand, intermingled, we see chunks. I'm not sure if it's granite. Some in our community would say it's red brick. A lot of this gold fleck in it, and a lot of pieces that resemble this looking more like a granite. And just right here, could this have been a brick? some kind of a green hue. So, so that's it. I thank you for joining me, and do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Today I'm just sitting here in a parking lot. I'll be sleeping here next to this Dino Mart, and maybe I can show you what that looks like. But I feel like it's kind of early, pre-midnight. I wonder if you can see this. So here is a glorious 100-foot tower. Today, this is what we build as monuments, beacons, calling out to the innocent and naive. In the past, they built towers for the sake of beauty alone. Notice the strong pillars leading to the golden arches and the dinosaur fueling our lives. Some would say this is all we need, right here. Moving modern man forward. Let me show you what I saw today. Minding my own business, driving along at 75 miles an hour, and suddenly I looked over, just at the right time, and I was at mile marker 40 on the Utah side, on Highway 15 here. And too bad I'm not on the Google Earth, because I don't think I can get a street view here. But nevertheless, I looked over and saw these towering red spires, sharp and pointy, and then I hit this little curve here and had to focus on the road. And this was mind-blowing. I quickly jotted down where I was and the mile marker, and here I am now. Look at this place. Kolob Canyon. Just a mind-blower. And Kolob, if you don't know Mormon history, is supposed to be the planet in which the Mormons came from. Reminding me of Krypton, like Superman. And this is something worth exploring. What is going on here? Again, I just saw it driving by, just a little tiny piece poking out, and it was like I'd seen heaven. And here I am now, just sitting in my car. Look at that. So is this a melted city or a giant beast or what? I don't know. But there is a lot of fascinating stuff to explore here. Beginning with some of these caves. Personally, I've always been looking for a good cave into the underrealm, just to have a little peek. And here, what are these? Old tunnels? So amazing. Look at this. Who's ever talked about Kolob Canyon? Perhaps this is a little secret, but not such a secret because there is a visitor center right here, or this is a view area, and down here, right off the highway, we have a little visitor center there, and very fascinating. And this just gets us in there. I'm sure there's spots that one could pull over and go exploring. And if I've ever seen a place that looks promising as far as our ancient history, the history that is seldom spoken of, this might be the place. And I encourage you all to jump in and have a look. And here we do see a nice trail. Or is this an old wall? Absolutely fascinating. Let me know what you guys think. I'm very excited to have found this purely on accident.